She thought she buried her only son, but when she returned to his grave, a strange woman was there, crying, holding a baby. What this billionaire mother discovered next left her speechless. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. She froze. That baby, those eyes, they looked just like her son's. Margaret Hill was one of the richest women in the country, but all the money in the world hadn't saved her from heartbreak. 2 years ago, she lost her only child, her son, Daniel, in a devastating car accident that left her hollow, drifting through life like a ghost wrapped in designer silk. Every Sunday since that awful day, Margaret made the same pilgrimage. No chauffeur, no security, no media, just her and her memories. She would kneel beside his headstone, run her fingers over his engraved name, and talk to him. Sometimes about nothing, sometimes about everything. It was the only place she felt real anymore. But this Sunday was different. As her black Mercedes purred to a stop near the edge of the cemetery, she saw someone already there. A young woman, black, maybe in her early 20s, was kneeling in front of Daniel's grave. She held a baby close to her chest, rocking gently as silent sobs shook her shoulders. Margaret stepped out, her heels crunching softly on the gravel. She instinctively froze, hidden behind a tall oak, her breath caught in her throat. She watched in stunned silence as the woman placed a single white rose at the foot of the grave. The baby squirmed, letting out a soft cry. The woman gently hushed the infant, whispering words Margaret couldn't make out. Something tugged at Margaret's heart, an old ache resurfacing, stronger and more confusing than before. If sensing her presence, the woman turned. Their eyes met, and that's when Margaret froze. The baby, those eyes, they looked just like Daniel's. That same deep ocean blue, the same serious, knowing gaze he had even as a toddler. Margaret's breath caught in her throat, and for a second, the world tilted. "Who are you?" Margaret's voice cracked as she stepped forward. The young woman stood up quickly, startled. She held the baby a little tighter and wiped her tears. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'll leave." "No," Margaret's voice was firm now, though her heart pounded wildly. "You were visiting my son's grave. I think I deserve to know why." The woman hesitated, swallowing hard. Then she looked down at the baby and sighed, her expression torn between fear and resolve. "My name is Alana," she said quietly. "And this is Elijah. Her voice wavered. "He's Daniel's son." Silence. The kind of silence that hums in your ears and makes your skin prickle. Margaret felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Daniel never said anything. He would have told me." Alana bit her lip and looked down at the baby, now dozing peacefully in her arms. "We met in college," she said, her voice almost apologetic. "It wasn't serious at first. He didn't tell anyone about me. He said it was complicated because of his family, the media. I found out I was pregnant after the accident." Margaret staggered back, blinking hard. "Pregnant? A grandson?" She stared at the baby. He had Daniel's eyes, yes, but also his tiny dimple, that same furrow in the brow when he frowned. It was undeniable. "Why didn't you come to me?" Margaret asked, her voice trembling. "Why now?" Tears welled in Alana's eyes again. "I was scared. I didn't know if you'd want to see us. I didn't want money. I wanted Elijah to know where he came from, to know his father, to know he was loved." Margaret's knees felt weak. She slowly stepped forward, her eyes locked on the baby. Elijah, her grandson, flesh and blood, a piece of Daniel still in this world. "May I hold him?" she asked softly. Alana hesitated, then nodded. Carefully, she passed the baby into Margaret's waiting arms. The moment Elijah nestled against her chest, a sob escaped Margaret's lips. Warm, chubby fingers wrapped instinctively around her thumb. Her eyes flooded with tears, grief and joy, tangled together in one overwhelming wave. For the first time in 2 years, Margaret felt something bloom in her chest. Hope, redemption, a second chance. As she looked down at Elijah's peaceful face, she whispered, "Hello, my sweet boy. I've been waiting for you." Margaret approached cautiously, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth as she walked between the headstones. Something about the young woman's presence felt heavy, intentional. This wasn't someone who had simply wandered into the wrong place. The woman looked up, startled, quickly wiping at her tear-streaked face with the back of her hand. Her eyes were puffy, red-rimmed, and filled with something Margaret recognized all too well: grief. I'm sorry," the woman said, standing abruptly. She clutched the baby tighter against her chest. "I didn't know anyone would be here." Margaret said nothing at first. She took in the woman's appearance. Young, maybe in her early 20s. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she wore a faded blue waitress uniform with a name tag that read Alicia. There was something in her posture, half defiant, half defeated, that tugged at Margaret's curiosity. Finally, Margaret spoke. Her voice was steady but cold. "That's my son's grave." Alicia's lips parted slightly, and she gave a faint nod. "I know." Margaret's brow furrowed. "How do you know him?" Alicia looked down for a moment, shifting her weight awkwardly, as if rehearsing the answer in her head. "My name's Alicia. I worked at a diner near his apartment. Daniel used to come in a lot. We became friends." Margaret blinked. Friends? Daniel had never mentioned anyone named Alicia. He'd been close with a tight circle from school, a few colleagues from his startup days. But this woman didn't fit into any world Margaret knew. She glanced at the baby, round cheeks, thick curls, fast asleep in Alicia's arms. Something about him made her heart pound harder. That baby. Margaret's voice softened. "Is he yours?" Alicia hesitated, as if bracing herself. Then she nodded slowly. "Yes. His name is Micah." A pause. Margaret's eyes narrowed, connecting dots she didn't want to see. Micah. The baby had a familiar tilt to his eyebrows, the shape of his nose, even the slight curl of his mouth as he slept. Margaret had seen that same face looking up at her in crib photos, in birthday videos, in high school yearbooks. She swallowed hard. And his father? Alicia met her gaze. Then, after a deep breath, she said the words that would change Margaret's world forever. "He's Daniel's son." The words rang out like a bell, clear and shattering. Margaret's breath caught. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her fingers trembled at her side. "You're lying," she whispered, though her voice betrayed the doubt already creeping in. "He never said anything. He would have told me." Alicia's expression softened with understanding. "I don't blame you for thinking that, but it's the truth. I didn't know I was pregnant until a few weeks after he passed. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't know how. I was scared." Margaret's eyes were fixed on the child now. Micah, her grandson? Every instinct in her told her to protect herself. This could be some scam, some opportunist trying to make headlines or get money. But standing here, face to face with Alicia, she didn't sense manipulation. She sensed something else: pain, sincerity, and something that felt too real to dismiss. She took a cautious step forward. How long were you and Daniel involved?" Alicia took a deep breath. "About 6 months. It started casual, but he was kind to me. We talked a lot. He told me about his dreams, his pressures. He didn't care that I worked in a diner. He said I made him feel normal." Margaret swallowed hard. "That sounded like Daniel. He didn't tell anyone about me," Alicia continued. "He said his family life was complicated, that he didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't push. I wish I had." Silence fell between them. Micah stirred in his sleep and let out a soft sigh. Margaret's heart twisted. After a long pause, she asked, her voice barely a whisper, "May I see him?" Alicia hesitated, then gently peeled back the blanket to reveal the baby's face. Margaret leaned closer, studying the soft features. The resemblance was undeniable. Her hand rose, instinctively, but stopped short. "He has his father's eyes," Margaret murmured, tears welling in her own. "And that chin, that's the Hill jawline." Alicia gave a faint, sad smile. "Sometimes, when he smiles, it's like Daniel's still here." Margaret straightened slowly, trying to steady her breathing. Her mind reeled. How had she gone 2 years not knowing her son had left behind a piece of himself? "I need time," she said finally. "But if what you're saying is true, then Micah is family." Alicia nodded, relief softening her tense shoulders. And for the first time in 2 years, Margaret didn't walk away from Daniel's grave feeling empty. She walked away knowing part of him had never left. "Daniel had a child? And never told me." Her perfectly polished exterior threatened to crack under the weight of the revelation. She stood frozen as her mind struggled to catch up her son, her beautiful, brilliant Daniel, had lived an entire chapter of his life that she never knew about. And now, here it was, unfolding before her beside his grave. Alicia sat on the grass, her back slightly hunched, the baby nestled in her lap. Her fingers moved rhythmically along the edge of the blanket, soothing the child more for her own nerves than for his. I never meant to keep him a secret, Alicia began, her voice soft. It wasn't like that. Daniel and I, we kept our relationship quiet because he was trying to protect both of us. He didn't want attention, said everything in his life had a spotlight on it. Margaret sank to her knees on the opposite side of the headstone, too drained to keep standing. The cold granite pressed against her legs, grounding her in a reality she hadn't asked for. He was kind, Alicia continued, brushing a curl from Micah's forehead. Funny, too, once you got past his quiet. He used to bring me books. Said I reminded him of the main character in one. Smart, but underestimated. She smiled faintly. He never treated me like I was just a waitress. Not once. Margaret's throat tightened. That sounded like her son, always thoughtful, always seeking meaning in people. And yet, this wasn't the life she had imagined for him. She had thought Daniel was single, focused on work, building a future. Not in love, not secretly planning. To introduce someone. Alicia's next words pierced deeper than Margaret expected. About a week before the accident, Daniel said he was ready, Alicia whispered. He told me he wanted me to meet you. Said it was time. Margaret's breath caught. He said you were tough but fair, Alicia added, glancing up shyly. That you could be intimidating. But he also said you had the biggest heart, especially when it came to him. A tear slipped down Margaret's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after he died, Alicia continued. At first, I thought it was just late grief messing with my body. But the test, it was positive. Her voice cracked slightly. I was terrified. Margaret finally spoke. Why didn't you come to me? I wanted to, Alicia said quickly. So many times. I even wrote a letter once. But I kept thinking, what if she thinks I'm lying? What if she hates me? I had nothing to prove Daniel was the father, not really. Just memories. And Micah. Margaret's eyes shifted to the baby, now sound asleep, his chest rising and falling in the safety of his mother's arms. She leaned in slightly, examining his delicate features. There was no denying it now. The resemblance was haunting. She remembered a photo, Daniel at 3 years old, sitting in a sandbox, covered in dirt, and smiling like he'd just discovered the world. Micah had that same smile, that same spark waiting to emerge. I lost everything when Daniel died, Margaret murmured. He was my world. My husband passed when Daniel was just a baby. I raised him alone. Every decision I made, it was for him. Alicia nodded solemnly. I know. He told me. He loved you, Margaret. He really did. He just didn't know how to bridge the two parts of his life. A long silence stretched between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full of things unsaid, emotions rising and falling like waves crashing against the shore. Then Margaret said something that surprised even herself. I'm not angry. Alicia looked up in shock. I should be, Margaret continued. I should feel betrayed, left out. But I'm not. I'm heartbroken. And yet, she looked at Micah again, her voice trembling. I haven't felt this kind of ache in a long time. Not grief. Something else. Alicia studied her carefully. Hope. Margaret nodded, her lips quivering. Yes, hope. She reached out, this time not stopping herself. Her fingers gently brushed Micah's tiny hand. He stirred and gripped. Her finger in his sleep, the way Daniel used to when he was a baby. It undid her completely. I don't know what comes next, she said softly. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of his life. Alicia's eyes welled with tears. She nodded, too emotional to speak. And in the stillness of the cemetery, surrounded by memories and new beginnings, 2 women, bound by love, loss, and the child between them, took the first step toward healing. Together, Margaret wasn't the type to take anything at face value. She had built an empire on facts, contracts, and proof. Her instincts told her Alicia was telling the truth, but instincts weren't enough. Not for something like this. I want a DNA test, Margaret had said, her voice calm but firm. Alicia didn't even flinch. Of course, she replied immediately. I want you to have peace of mind. That moment told Margaret everything she needed to know about the young woman. She wasn't here for money or attention. She was here for Micah. For Daniel's memory, 2 weeks later, the results arrived. 99.99% match. Micah was Daniel's son. Margaret sat alone in her bedroom that night, the envelope still clutched in her trembling hands. Her carefully curated world, one of cold marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and perfectly managed grief, crumbled with a single sentence. She cried. Not the quiet, composed tears she had grown used to shedding over the years, but deep, unfiltered. Sobs that came from somewhere raw. Because now, it wasn't just pain she felt. It was love. A second chance. Micah was her grandson. A living, breathing piece of Daniel she never knew existed. The next morning, after a long night of little sleep and too many memories, Margaret made a decision. She called Alicia. "Would you join me for lunch?" she asked gently. "Just the two of us. No lawyers, no expectations. I want to talk." Alicia sounded surprised, but said yes. They met at a quiet cafe just outside the city, one of Margaret's favorites, tucked away from the cameras and gossip. Margaret arrived first, dressed not in her usual designer armor, but in a soft cardigan and flats. She wanted to meet Alicia not as Margaret Hill, media mogul, but as Daniel's mother, as Micah's grandmother. When Alicia walked in, Micah in a carrier at her side, Margaret stood up and greeted them with a warm, nervous smile. They ordered tea, sandwiches, something light. After a few minutes of polite small talk, Margaret looked across the table and spoke with quiet sincerity. "I want to know everything," she said. "Not just about Daniel. About you. About Micah. I want to be in his life. If you'll let me." Alicia's eyes widened, caught off guard. I thought you'd hate me for keeping him a secret." Margaret shook her head slowly. "I did. For about a minute," she admitted. "But then I looked at Micah, and I realized, you're the only one keeping Daniel alive." Tears welled up in Alicia's eyes. "You didn't ask for this," Margaret continued, her voice growing stronger. "You could have walked away, disappeared, but you stayed. You brought Micah here. You gave me the gift of knowing him." Alicia blinked hard. "I didn't know if you'd want us. We're not from your world. I live in a tiny apartment. I work double shifts. But I swear, Micah is loved. He's happy. I can see that," Margaret said, smiling. "He's bright-eyed, curious, just like his father. Daniel was always asking questions, always wanting to take things apart and understand them. One time, he dismantled the kitchen blender just to see how the motor worked. I found pieces of it under his bed for months." Alicia laughed. "That sounds like Micah already. He's obsessed with buttons and lights. Even tries to fix the TV remote with his toy hammer." They both laughed then, genuine, warm. And for the first time, something shifted. This wasn't about loss anymore. It was about what remained. "I don't want to overstep," Margaret said softly. "But I'd love to help, however I can. Not just financially. I mean babysitting, playdates, birthdays. I want him to know me. I want you to know me." Alicia looked down at Micah, now dozing peacefully. She nodded slowly. "I think he'd love that. And so would I." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the little boy sleep, two women from vastly different worlds connected by one precious life. When the bill came, Margaret reached for it, but Alicia gently touched her wrist. "Next time," Alicia said with a smile. "We take turns." Margaret smiled back, her heart swelling. And as she walked to her car later that afternoon, the sunlight felt a little warmer, the weight on her shoulders a little lighter. For the first time in years, Margaret Hill wasn't walking alone. She had someone to walk beside, and someone to walk for. What began as cautious visits soon turned into something warmer, something that felt like family. Margaret, once known for her steely composure and ruthless business acumen, had become a familiar figure in the narrow halls of Alicia's modest apartment. Every week, she arrived with something new: books for Micah, groceries for the fridge, or just a warm meal she'd had her chef prepare. She helped pay the utilities, fixed a broken sink without being asked, and watched Micah while Alicia worked long shifts at the diner. At first, Alicia struggled to accept the help. She'd spent years surviving on her own, learning not to expect kindness. But Margaret wasn't doing it out of guilt or pity. It became clear over time. She was doing it out of love. For Micah, for Daniel, for the family she was slowly, quietly building with this woman she never expected to know. Still, for Margaret, it wasn't enough. The apartment was cramped. The stairs creaked dangerously. The neighbors were loud, and every time she left Micah there, her heart twisted with unease. One rainy evening, after seeing Alicia carry a sleeping Micah up 3 flights of stairs with bags in both hands, Margaret made a decision that a few days later, she showed up with papers and a small envelope. Alicia greeted her at the door, tired but smiling, balancing a laundry basket on one hip. "Hey," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're early." "I couldn't wait," Margaret said with a soft smile. She stepped inside, placed the envelope on the counter, and handed Alicia a set of keys. "This is for you," she said simply. Alicia blinked. "What is it?" Margaret opened the envelope and slid out a folder. Inside were real estate documents. "It's a house," she explained. 3 bedrooms, fenced backyard, quiet neighborhood, 5 minutes from a great school and park. And the best part, no stairs. Alicia froze. Her eyes scanned the papers, then moved to the gleaming silver key in her hand. Her lip quivered. I don't understand." Margaret stepped closer, her voice low and filled with emotion. "Because you loved my son when I wasn't there. Because you raised his child when no one else even knew he existed. Because you stayed when it would have been easier to disappear. And because family." She took Alicia's hand gently. "Doesn't always look the way we expect." Alicia couldn't hold back anymore. Tears poured down her cheeks as she sank into the nearest chair, overwhelmed. "Why are you doing all this?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm just me." Margaret knelt beside her. "You're not just anything," she said firmly. "You're Micah's mother. You're the reason he smiles. The reason he's healthy and safe and loved. That's not small. That's everything." Micah toddled into the room then, dragging a stuffed giraffe by one leg, his curls bouncing with each step. He crawled up into Margaret's lap as if he'd done it 100 times, and in many ways, he had. She held him close, breathing in the soft, sweet scent of baby lotion and innocence. "He has Daniel's eyes," she murmured. Alicia nodded. "And your stubbornness." They laughed, the moment lightened by truth. Margaret looked up. "This house, it's not charity. It's a beginning, a fresh start. You can decorate it however you want, grow vegetables in the yard, host birthday parties. And if you'll allow it, I'd like to be there for all of it." Alicia wiped her cheeks. "You're already there." And so, a billionaire and a waitress, 2 women from worlds that once seemed miles apart, found each other not through wealth or power, but through grief, love, and the child who unknowingly became the bridge between them, not bound by contracts, not tied by blood, but by something far more resilient. Family, as the sun set over the city that night, Margaret drove Alicia and Micah to their new home. Alicia cried again when she saw the front porch swing. Margaret beamed when Micah raced through the hallway laughing that it wasn't perfect. Life never was, but it was real. And it was theirs, later, as Margaret tucked Micah into his new bed and kissed his forehead. She whispered, "You saved me, little one. You brought me back to life." In the doorway, Alicia watched, her arms folded tightly, her eyes filled with peace. Sometimes, the family we lose makes way for the family we never saw coming. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories that remind us of the power of love, loss, and second chances. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in the unexpected.